Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Val.
And Tracy just made a very specific request from you, Val, before we went on the air. He wanted to get your quick thoughts / review of Morbius that came out a couple weeks ago now when this episode drops.
Right.
And I'm going to do some shameless plugs really quick. If you want to read, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but if you want to read my full review of Morbius, you can go to whattoseewithval.com. I will also, now that it's been out for a while, we'll push it over to our website as well, because I know we don't like to spoil it for you. We like to give you a couple of weeks. So Morbius, I gave it a B-. In my scoring. For me, I thought Jared Leto did a great job at Morbius. I've never read a single Morbius comic. So coming from that, like, I don't know what the expectations are, but I do agree that Jared Leto is a great actor. I do like what they did with him and Matt. Is it Matt Brown? Matt Smith. I knew it was some boring name.
Like a generic name, yeah.
Matt Smith. Yeah. He is not generic at all, but Matt Smith from Doctor Who is in this movie, and his character is very compelling as well. Also, there were some action scenes in this movie that I feel like I haven't seen. It's really hard, especially in comic book movies, to give me something new. And I really think they strived to give us something new with these action fighting scenes in Morbius. It is a dark movie. So it's not like if you went to see Spider-Man and you're thinking, I want something just as upbeat. This is not upbeat. This is dark. There are a few laughs. Most of them you've seen in the trailer. But for me, it falls in the same line as Moon Knight, because Moon Knight also is happening. And I've seen the first 4 episodes in that I really like the ideas of both of these stories and both of these characters, but I do think that both the Morbius movie and Moon Knight, for me, you are not giving me enough to care enough about what I'm watching. And Morbius, and it is a short movie, which is great. It's not a 3-hour or 2-hour, like it's quick. The pacing is great. But I want a little bit more. I cared really about one character that dies in the movie. And I don't know that I should have cared about that character as much as I did, but I do like that this is a stepping point movie. They usually do that with Spider-Man, where Spider-Man was always a stepping point into something else.
Right.
I feel like we're leading into the Sinister Six.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. With there are 2 scenes. There's a credit, mid-credit, and then an after credit. They both hold around the same story line. I thought they were kind of crap. I didn't think they were that great, but then just thinking about what they mean gets me excited. So that's why it's a B-, because it's just fine. It's fun. There were things about it that I thought were really cool visually. And I do think Jared Leto holds his own. I do think Matt Smith holds his own for sure. But I do think it was just not enough that I care enough, I guess.
That's a much nicer grade than a lot of the other local critics that I've read.
I'm just a nicer person.
True.
It's interesting though. You mentioned that you hadn't ever read a Morbius comic, and I haven't either. And I think we're kind of getting to the point with some of these characters and some of these movies that they're doing now that we're kind of getting to some of these characters that people are less familiar with. I've only seen the first episode of Moon Knight at the time that we're recording this. By the time that we record this, I'll have seen whatever's come out by that point. But I really enjoyed it. And part of it is I don't know the Moon Knight character very much at all. And so this is kind of my introduction to the character.
Yeah.
And now there may be people that are huge fans of Moon Knight. And I'm sure
and there are. It has a big following.
It does.
Yeah.
And they're probably pulling their hair out about something in the show that doesn't hold true to the character. And I get that. I get it. Because it doesn't matter what book or series or whatever that you're adapting to a movie.
What's on the screen.
People are going to be upset about what any adaptation, and I understand that, and that's fine. But for me, because I don't know the character, I've really enjoyed the first episode. I think Oscar Isaac's really good as this character, and that's what's intriguing about some of these movies that are coming out now is they still kind of have that superhero type feel to it in a different way. I mean, Moon Knight's a very different superhero than Spider-Man or Iron Man, but there's still that comic book movie feel with characters that I'm just not familiar with. So I feel like I'm experiencing what a lot of people
Fresh.
experience with the MCU when Iron Man came out who didn't know Iron Man at all. And
Yeah.
I think that's fun
Well, and I
for
feel
me.
like both Moon Knight and Morbius, because most of our superhero movies, it's the conflict with themselves. Like Iron Man had a huge conflict with himself, but Morbius and Moon Knight have literal conflicts with the other person that they are, and they both came out at the same time.
Mhm.
Because you have Moon Knight, who literally is two different people in the conflict of how do we both exist, and do I exist without you? And then you have Morbius that without being this other thing, he will die. So how do you recompense those situations? And I thought it was, I don't know if it was brilliant or not that they had them both come out at the same time, because they're similar um things. They're both also more violent and more dark in my mind. You'll get into Moon Knight and you'll realize there's a little more adult violence
Oh, sure.
in Moon Knight, but the same with Morbius. There are some beautiful shots of Moon Knight that is very comic book as he's running across the rooftops that you haven't gotten to yet, that I
Right.
was just like, "Mwah." Like I haven't seen the comic, but that's what it looked like, and it was beautiful. It's like
Yeah.
this in the
You
Spider-Man,
just know.
scene when all three Spider-Men jump off, and they like that comic book like cover. There are some moments in Moon Knight that are amazing. But I definitely want to talk to you guys in a few weeks, and maybe we'll bring in Ty
Yeah.
to really get into what you guys think about Moon Knight, because I have some things, but I can't
You can't
Right.
say.
bring
We're
them
not
up
there
yet.
yet.
I also have an issue, and maybe I shouldn't. Should I have an issue that there's only 6 episodes? Like, if there wasn't enough story line to have 8, should we have the story yet? Like, I just feel like
I can see it,
when you get to episode 3, I feel like you might feel the same,
and that could be,
but
and
episode 4 then changes things. So,
so I
Okay.
think I can see it both ways, right? Like, okay, if there's not enough material there for 8 episodes, then should you make this a series? But at the same time, I kind of appreciate that if
We're
there's
not
not enough
bloating.
material for 8 episodes, don't give me 2 filler episodes that star the
right.
Mandalorian
Right.
instead of Boba Fett. Like, if there's not enough
No, I
material
agree with
there,
you on that.
don't do it.
But I almost, yeah, I don't want to put anything into your minds, but I definitely would like to revisit this when the
Sure.
series is over. We'll bring Ty on so that he can tell us all about the intricate life of Moon Knight and the things
Yes.
that we don't
I know
know.
he's much more familiar
Focus
with
is
Moon
on.
Knight than I am,
I
and
just love how he makes me appreciate all of these
Yeah.
stories more, because he's so knowledgeable. This little 12-year-old knows everything.
yeah.
He's
Well,
I just can't believe his knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, he knows so much. Like, I almost don't want to make an opinion on something until then I talk to him about it, and then he points out all the things, and I'm like, my mind is blown, and I'm like, oh, I do like this more than I thought I did.
yeah. Well, speaking of superheroes and people with amazing stories, let's talk about Ashton's favorite son, Edward Bloom, in the movie Big Fish, because he basically was a superhero.
I
If these
feel like
stories are
he
true,
was. I feel
yeah,
like he was.
yeah. So Big Fish is directed by Tim Burton, came out, I believe, in 2003, um, and we have Obi-Wan Kenobi starring as a young dad, or the younger version of Albert Finney,
Yeah.
which both of them do an amazing job in this film. Albert Finney's a huge
Especially when
talent.
you have the 70s haircut
Yes,
of him. I'm like, you could become Albert Finney, and I would totally buy that.
and what's amazing, this is what I will say about Ewan McGregor. Yes, I know Obi-Wan's real name, but this is what I
I
will
hope
say
so.
about him. He can make any bad haircut look good
Oh,
somehow. The
yeah.
70s haircut, the
Mhm.
mullet he sports in episode 2, like, there were a lot of problems with episode 2, but his mullet was not one of them. Like,
He
it's
makes
just
all the
impressive.
bad hair look good. Like, he
Yeah.
has been in a lot of movies where they've given him some crap hair,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he still looks good. But I mean, how nervous must he have been to be like, okay, so there's this movie Big Fish. Tim
Mhm.
Burton, who was directing everything cool at the time,
Mhm.
is the director, but you're gonna play Albert Finney, like a young Albert
Yeah.
Finney. Like for me, I would have been
Yeah.
like,
As an
I
actor,
might need to think about this because this
Uh-huh.
could go really great or it could go really, really bad. And this is one of those movies I feel like, same with Quiz Show that we did last week, not a lot of people pay attention to it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they're two just hidden gems
Oh, for
of
sure.
movies. Like, I love this movie. And when I bring it up to people and I just assume everybody has seen it, they're like, I don't even know what that is. And I'm like, how? How do you not know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know we are nowhere near this point, and I'm not gonna give you my grade for the movie yet, but I will say this, you know Tim Burton is one of my favorite directors.
Right.
In my opinion, Big Fish is the best movie that he's ever made,
I would lean towards that.
I
Yes.
agree with you.
and so, I love this movie. It's just one of my favorites that I've you know, Tracy, last week you mentioned Quiz Show was in your top 20 of all time. This is up there for me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. Well, and the thing is that's, you everyone says a good actor is someone who disappears on screen into their part, right? There's a lot of movies where I can see Sandra Bullock as Sandra Bullock, and then she's had
Right.
movies where I don't see Sandra Bullock, I see her. And I think the reason why I love this movie so much, and it's so contradictory, I'll say it, is because I love when I know a movie is a Tim Burton movie because it has his signature on it.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
Mhm.
feel like in this movie, I love it even more because I keep forgetting that it's a
Yeah.
Tim Burton movie.
This
He
is he's
disappears
uh-huh.
into and lets the material shine on its own. And there is a time and a place for a Tim Burton signature, right?
Oh, for
But I
sure.
think
Right.
he knew and he controlled himself to know that this story, and there are like you kind of there are moments that are these odd moments,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's not like punching you in the face
Right.
that Tim Burton
Right.
did that. He let the
Mhm.
story be its own oddity. And so I think that's why it's my favorite Tim Burton film.
It's interesting because, there's a moment toward the end of this film where Dr. Bennett is talking to Will, and he says, "Do you wanna know the story about the day you were born?" And Will's like, "Yes, I've heard my dad's version, but I wanna know what really happened." And so he's like, "Yeah, your mom came in, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everything went smoothly, you were about a week early, but there were no complications, and your dad was away at business, but that was fine, dads weren't in the room usually." And that was the story. He's like, "Isn't the one your dad tells more interesting?" And to me, that captures a lot of what I feel like Tim Burton does as a filmmaker. He tells us a lot of truths in the movies that he makes. He tells us stories that are true in what they're saying, what the message that they're conveying, all sorts of things. But doesn't he tell it in a more entertaining way than just being like, "Oh, you should not judge a book by its cover," or "You should appreciate this." He tells it in a much more interesting way, and I feel like that moment kind of captures who Tim Burton is as a movie maker, even though I agree, Val, this doesn't hit you over the head with the Tim Burtonness
Right. Right.
like, like a Beetlejuice or like a
Pee-wee's Big
Edward
Adventure.
Scissorhands or, Sweeney Todd. Like, this is much
Mhm.
more it's spice and flavor throughout that makes you feel like, "Oh, this is a Tim Burton movie," but it's not over the top.
And there's so much heart. This movie is just like it give you have feels from the first moment that the movie starts, like you have feels. And I think, even more the second time and the third time that you watch it. But it's just also just so fun to watch. Like you could shut the sound off to the film and just watch what's happening.
Mhm.
And it's so much fun to just watch what's going on.
Well, and
Yep.
like I would Ewan McGregor is just such a good actor, and I love the fact that he can pull off just about any accent. In the hands of a lesser actor, that
Mhm.
accent would have been a joke, and
Yeah.
yet somehow you're like, "Oh, it's endearing." It's kind of
Yeah.
folksy Southern, and to hear this Scottish guy doing that is so great.
And it's so natural,
It
like,
is.
it's unbelievable, really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you I love his Expedia commercial, which sounds so weird when he's talking about how are we going to remember the stuff that we bought? But then I love the line where he's like, or the places we're going to go. And the way he's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
ready for a trip.
I don't believe that I have heard this Expedia commercial. I'm
Oh,
gonna
it's
have to go
fantastic.
searching for it.
It premiered during the Super Bowl, and now it's been on a few
Oh,
times, but
see,
yeah,
I didn't watch the Super Bowl, so
But
but he does such a good job, and the way he does the accent, the way he plays this character just oozes with charisma,
uh,
and he's just so likable, and it's weird because you watch the movie, and at first you're getting I mean, it's all from Will's point of view, like, how he views his dad, and but it's through his dad telling the stories, and the whole time you're thinking, I should really hate this guy because he basically leaves his wife to raise his son and he's never home and he's completely absent in his life and makes up all these stories, but you don't. You love him throughout the whole stinking movie.
yeah.
And then at the end you find out that you really should because he was a pretty decent guy.
Yeah.
Spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it's also been almost 20 years. So
well, and it's interesting. I haven't seen this in years, probably closer to when it came out. And to watch it now, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, is I had a very estranged situation with my dad for a long time, and to a certain extent, we still do. I love the line. This is a completely different movie, but I love the line from City Slickers where the one lady is complaining about how all the guys always talk about sports, and the guy looks at her and says, you know, in the worst of times with my dad, we could still talk about sports, and
mhm.
I get that. And so to see this guy who's struggling with his dad, and when he says the line like, I don't really even know you, and I get that, like I feel that, and I've made bridges and we've made inroads, but I'm not especially close with him. Like he wasn't my hero growing up, and so that really hit me on a different level tonight or yesterday, which was really nice.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie a lot, and I
Mhm.
had no idea until this show that Ruthie, cute little Ruthie, was played by Miley Cyrus.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like, I had no
Oh
I've seen
wow.
her in almost everything, and
Uh-huh.
I had no idea that this little Ruthie was Miley
Wow.
Cyrus. It was one of her first roles.
mm,
But
Oh
the
my
cast the
gosh.
cast of this movie, because Bill Crudup is one of my favorite actors, and he's kind of been, in and out of the spotlight,
Yeah.
throughout the years in
He's
some
one where
really big movies, and then
he's always on the edge of the spotlight though. Like,
well, he was in the Running movie, about Nike,
right.
which was, I thought, just so great, and now he's in, The Morning Show,
Mm.
which is such a good series. But he's always just kind of over here, and you're
Yeah.
like, he's so good, and then he goes away for a long time, and then he comes back. But in this movie, it was during the time where I really thought he, you know, was going to be kind of a bigger thing, but he's done some great movies. He is a
Oh
great
yeah.
actor, but I think he
mhm,
does such a great job opposite Finney in this movie, as because I believe him.
Yeah.
Like,
mhm.
he really, really wants to like his dad, but at the same time, he doesn't wanna let himself like his dad because of all of these stories that he's created in his mind as well. When his dad has created all these other stories, they're very much similar, but he's trying to be exactly opposite of who his dad was, and in doing that, he's almost alienating his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of this story of accepting where you came from and
Mhm.
who you are is kind of more important than like really knowing, I guess.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting, um, I am always drawn to stories about the relationship between father and son, and I really like Field of Dreams is another one that I really like for that reason
Mhm.
and things like that. And when I watch this, Tracy, I'm reminded of growing up. I felt a lot like the young Will, where like when his dad would tell those stories, his dad was like his hero and everything else. And then as he got older and realized none of them could be true, and that kind of disillusionment. And I feel like that's how my relationship has gone a lot with my dad is
Mm.
I think when I was younger, he was like this guy that could do no wrong. And now that I've gotten a little bit older and I've seen him more as an adult and things like that, I can see kind of some of those holes in in his
Mhm.
armor, and I can see some of those cracks and whatever, and I think that is a struggle. It has been for me, and I think it can happen with anybody where you have a hero, somebody that you look
Yeah.
up to, and then you start to realize, but none of it was true,
Mhm.
or big portions of it weren't true. And then how do you reconcile that? And I don't know. I mean, there,
And still find love on the other side.
yeah, and I think that
That's
that can be
that's the
hard.
hard thing. Yeah.
Well, I think the funeral was such a great moment because he's trying to figure out what's true, what's not true, and then he starts, seeing all these people show up that are the characters in the story. So,
Yeah,
like, a big part of what he was saying, he experienced, but
Mhm.
he just made it a story that he wanted his life to be because he was just this on the road salesman guy,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so when you live this life that you didn't think that was going to be yours, what's the harm in making it better?
yeah,
It's just and then some people like, well, it's a huge harm. And I don't, I just think we all have the stories in our head of what we want
Mhm.
our lives to be and what we want others to remember.
Right.
mhm,
And then we have the things that are actually happening, and so,
well,
it's so like magical and like fairy tale like, but at the same
Yeah.
time, we can all relate to it, like
Mhm.
yeah.
every single one of us.
Mhm.
I love where when he discovers the deed to Jennifer Hill's house, and he has built up in his mind that where my dad was really going was this second family somewhere that he loved more than me, that he loved
Mhm.
more than my mom, and he thinks he's found it when he finds this deed in Spectre, Alabama, because that was one of the prominent places that his dad talked about. And when he goes and visits her, and it leads up to that moment where she's telling the whole story of how he fixed everything up, and she tells it in a way that he would have told it too,
Yes.
Yeah.
like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
giant shifting the house back and all this other stuff, and it just gets to that moment where he goes to grab his hat off the hook, and she's like, "You could just leave it there," and moves in for the kiss. I'm like, "Oh," I remember watching that the first time being
No.
like, "Please
No.
don't, like, I don't
No.
want everything to shatter here." I get that he's telling these tall tales, and I don't, and there's, truth behind it, whatever, and then it doesn't. And she's like, "There are only 2 women to your father, your mom and everyone else, and
Mhm.
nobody else could be what your mom was." And I was like, "Okay, good." I just there are too many stories out there where it gets to that moment and you're like, realistically, cynically, I know that that's more often than not what's gonna happen, but
Right.
man, I like the stories where it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, and I love Helena Bonham Carter's role in this is
She's so good
Yes.
so
at this.
subtle, but
Mhm.
so, like, beautiful. And again, she is that secret that we all have locked away somewhere. You know what I like?
Mhm.
That's what she represents. She is the secret that's locked away in a place where probably nobody's gonna find it. And such a good role for her. Such a good
Yeah,
Mhm.
role.
yeah.
Subtle and amazing.
And I think it's interesting. I read too that like right before they were getting ready to film this, Tim Burton lost his father. And you
Mhm.
get kind of this melancholy. Like there's melancholy in a lot of his films. Like Edward Scissorhands is very melancholy, yet whimsical. And you kind of get that in this, but it's like so mature. And it's interesting when certain things happen to you at certain points of your life, and you're like, I don't know that he could have made this film back when he was doing Batman or
No.
some of those movies and Edward Scissorhands. And this is a different movie because he was a different director. And that really shines through on this for me.
It does, and I think that this is the movie too where that's where he solidly makes that transition from being this kinda quirky, weird director in everybody else's mind to Tim Burton's a serious filmmaker, and he
Mhm.
always should have been. Just because it's quirky and weird doesn't mean that it's not serious and amazing work, but, like, I think everybody's he's kind of fringe, not totally mainstream, and then you watch something like this and you're like, "No, he's amazing, and he
Yeah.
can do basically whatever he wants."
I was just thinking about, all the hairdos that Obi-Wan Kenobi has had, and I remembered this picture of us meeting Tom Holland, and I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
my hairdo is the same mullet as and it doesn't look good on me, and that's what I hate about this picture is that it is of all of my favorite people, And then I've got this mullet that I forever for the rest of my life.
See,
I
but
have
would
this.
disagree. You pulled that off.
No, no, you guys are great, but no.
Oh,
Well,
That-
let's see who is going to come to FanX this year, and we'll have to get a new
yes.
photo
We'll get a new group photo. Yes.
No,
because
I treasure this. I treasure this. But
there's
yeah.
something that I hate about that photo, but we're not going to talk about it, and I'm going to move on.
My regret is we didn't ask Tom Holland to jump on Val's back. Like
I
we
think
almost
he would have.
I think he would have, but they were like, don't make any special requests, and I still almost did, and I wish I had. But
Yeah, and he probably would have. And now
probably would have.
now celebrities won't do it because that's too much touching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I
You
think
know.
maybe we're shifting.
Yeah, we are.
But
It's
like
we
Disney's
keep going
bringing
back to
the
it, but I don't think
characters
there's
for-
any reason to.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's going to depend on the celebrity.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, you can, Disney World and Disneyland are bringing back character meet and greets,
Yep.
so you can actually hug them. And I was saying it the other day. I was like, you can hug them and touch them and whatever, and that just sounded weird. So I mean, just hug them and greet them, give them a high five, shake their hand.
Next time I'm with a character, I'm just gonna go like this, boop,
Just
and
like-
take a picture so I can be like, I'm touching him.
Yeah.
I'm touching him. Boop. To make it less creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. So, but no, I really, Big Fish is so good, and it is hard at the end because, like you said, Val, you get to the funeral and all of these people show up.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
Okay,
But
so
I
how
love-
much of it? What was the fiction? What was the reality?
Yeah.
And there
And
are things that I
love
picture.
I love the shot of the two women
Yes.
together, and then because when you first see them, you think they're twins, and then you realize they're conjoined twins, and then at the end where he thinks, "Oh my gosh, they are conjoined twins," and they just step away from each other.
Yeah.
That's really nicely done.
And when Carl gets out of the car, and it's the giant, but he's still a giant and really tall, just not 15 feet tall.
Right.
Danny DeVito was still as short as he was in the story, though.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of hairdos, that is not a good look for Danny DeVito in this movie.
I don't think it matters. I think we just expect him to.
I know,
I was
but
gonna say, is there a good look for Danny DeVito? I mean, I love Danny DeVito. He's
So do I.
incredibly talented.
I love him.
this with the mustache, I'm like, you look like Ron Jeremy, and that totally took me out of it last.
I don't know who you're talking about. I'm gonna need to Google that.
I would not recommend kids at home to Google that.
Don't. Don't do that.
I only know him from news reports, but yeah, that was just an unfortunate.
Well, I mean, we do get to see Danny DeVito's butt.
True.
So it's kind of
I feel like we've seen
Kinda
Danny
fits.
DeVito's butt a lot in movies and TV shows. Like, yeah,
I would think that I would remember that more, but
maybe you don't. Maybe your brain's trying to help you. Push it down.
But so this is my own headcanon with Big Fish. Like I was thinking about Danny DeVito's character in particular, right? And in the story, he turns into a werewolf, and we find out he's a real person. He's real, and when Edward kind of plays with him that night and keeps him from hurting anybody, that's when he finally gives him the girl's name and where she is, and she's at Auburn and everything. And I thought, so what's the reality there? Like, he obviously knew him because he came to his funeral, and I thought maybe he was like an alcoholic, and like one night he just went on a real bender, and he kind of just sat with him and made sure he didn't harm himself or anybody else, and he just appreciated that he never really shared that. And then how would you share that with your kids? Well, I don't want to go into that kind of detail. So he turned into this monster, aka a werewolf. And I think that that's where a lot of the stories kind of go. Is it's a lot less interesting to say, yeah, these were identical twin girls. They were attached they were one, and they were conjoined, and it just makes it more interesting. And I think that that's what he did. He took those realities and turned them into something more entertaining. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, and we talked last week about coloring of
Yeah.
Bushwell, but the
Yes.
coloring in this is so beautiful. And we talked about how they have those diffuse filters, and every time we have one of those flashbacks, we get kind of this soft filter, and we got lots of soft light, and because it is kind of this made up story, but yet still
Mhm.
real in certain ways. And
Yeah.
that is really, really nice.
Well, and whenever they would do that flashback, to me, what it always felt like is the romanticized memory that people have of the good old days when they talk
Yeah.
about back in the good old days, and that's how they picture the past, and knowing that's not at all what it really looked like,
Yeah.
I'm sure, but
Because
that's how
usually
they
the
pic
good old days, like, there was a lot of problems back then. There's a lot of
Yeah,
problems now. But
Right.
yeah,
yeah,
we pick the moments that get us through. Like, we don't wanna
Right.
sit and remember all of, and I do know some people that sit down and all they remember is the bad.
mhm,
You can only listen to that, like, so many times before you're like,
Mm.
"Dude, like, did anything good happen?" Like, and I just like that this is, yeah, he can remember all of the times that him and his wife probably got in a fight because he wasn't home, and all of the times that he was depressed in a hotel room because he didn't get to see his son, and like, all of that is reality. But how about we remember, all these other things? And so I just,
well,
yeah.
and if you're wanting to connect with your son and you come home, you're like, "Well, yeah, let me tell you about my business sales trip that I just took, and I
Mhm.
sold this many Handymatics, and I just did this," and, like,
Everybody wants to
that'll
be a
put him to
hero to
sleep.
their
It's a good
kid.
bedtime
Right.
story, but, like, he wanted to make it exciting and different, and
Yeah.
this is one of those movies I've seen so many times, I know what's going to happen, and it doesn't matter
Doesn't matter.
at
Yeah.
all, and when we got to the hospital scene, I was watching it, I was already starting to tear up. Like, I get emotional during movies, and
Mhm.
it is just who I am, and I've tried to accept it over time, but, um, I started getting emotional before it even was supposed to get emotional because I knew what was coming. I knew I was gonna get hit by a train, and I didn't care. I stood right in front of it on the tracks, like, "Bring it on."
Come
Come
on!
at me. Come at me,
When he
bro.
when he's like, "Tell me how it happens," and he's like, "I don't know that one, Dad. You never told me what you saw in the witch's eye. How does it start?" "Like this." And I'm like, just tears just cut, and
It's
I don't
gone.
I was a mess. I was gone. But I love that scene where he then tells the story like his dad would have told the story,
Yeah.
and he's like, "That's exactly how it happened." And then he goes. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm done. I'm wrecked for
Mhm.
the night. That's it."
Game over, man. Game over.
You kids can do whatever you want. I need to go to my room.
"Is dad okay?" "No, I'm not okay."
I need to ask dad for like $25. Let's put Big Fish on and then just wait.
There are a few scenes that will do that to me every time where I'll just it there that's one of them. The scene, and this is dumber than that one, I think, but the scene at the end of Return of the King where they're all gathered together and they're
Oh,
all
yeah.
bowing to Aragorn, and so the hobbits start to bow, and he's like, "My friends," I can't even say it, like, without getting a little bit emotional, "My friends, you bow to no one." I'm like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm wrecked."
They're just waiting for you. What
Yeah,
movies are you watching tonight? What do we need to ask for?
yeah. So, that's how
They
it goes
start
for
they
me.
start putting it up on the board for you, like Big
I'm
Fish.
sensing a recurring theme, but I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, I don't care. But sometimes you like to feel those kind of things, and it's good
Yeah,
to put
I
on a
think
movie that
so.
I know when I get to the end of this movie, this is how I'm gonna feel, and
See,
I
Yeah.
and I'm that way. We've talked about it before on the show, but I was recently on Matinee Heroes, and we discussed Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that's to me is the one where I'm like, I know I'm going to be a wreck, but you know what? I am okay with that.
yeah,
And the same exact thing. There are
yeah,
certain lines coming up where you're like, oh, this is gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. Oh, it hurts. And but you're still okay with it.
yep, yep, and that's this for me. So,
And speaking of that, I just want to bring this up totally off topic. I do
Mhm.
not think Jim Carrey should retire after Sonic 2. I definitely think he needs to do something else and then retire. I'm fine with him retiring and saying he wants to be an artist and he's put in his time and he's done his work. I'm not saying that Sonic 2 is a bad movie. I'm
Right.
actually supposed to be watching it in about 30 minutes, but I'm not going. Um, but I don't think that's what he should
That
end his career
yeah,
on.
yeah.
yeah, I would agree with that. Um, however, I don't think Jim Carrey cares.
No, I don't think he cares at all either. Like I think he's in a really good place in his life,
Yeah.
where he just, I've done my time, I've put in my work, I have what I need. This is what I want to do now. I want to paint. And I'm going to have opinions about things and I might share them every once in a while, but yeah, that's just my opinion. So I know that Tracy, if you can get on that and do
You
something
can call your
about
friend Jim.
Oh,
Say, hey,
Jim.
Jimmy, Tracy here.
just one more,
Jimmy.
just one more movie.
Just one more after that. Yeah,
Well-
but then he'll probably pick something totally. It'll be Dumb and Dumber 3 or something that nobody wants or asked for.
No, go back to Sonic. Go back to Sonic.
Yeah, and then we'll all be like, he should have just stopped with Sonic 2.
All right, Jim, do whatever you want. I respect you.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I really like Jim Carrey. I think he's an interesting individual, and I think he has made some interesting decisions in his life. But I kind of respect that he kind of just is who he is,
Mhm.
and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, and I get the feeling that Ewan McGregor is kind of the same. Like
I
Yeah.
do too.
he
Yeah.
is just going to do what he wants to do,
Like,
and I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see him come back.
I'm so excited.
Have you guys watched the new Obi-Wan trailer that came out this last week?
I haven't caught it yet.
I haven't yet.
Okay, I'll post it on. I mean, it'll be past, but I'll post it on
Sure.
our Facebook.
Yeah,
page.
I haven't seen the new one, but I get the feeling like he's like, I'm going to choose the roles that I want to do, not because I need to, not because my manager's making me, not because I'm trying to stay in the spotlight. Like, I'm going to do the stuff that fulfills me as a human and as an artist.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think that's awesome. And I'm glad that one of those
he's worked
roles
with
is
some of the
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and he's worked with some of the great directors like George Lucas, Tim Burton, Danny Boyle. I mean, the list just goes on, but it's crazy. I was thinking last night while watching this too, it kind of reminds me of his performance in Doctor Sleep,
Mhm.
which is the sequel to The Shining,
Mhm.
in just that he is just he just fits that role. Like it's like a hand in the glove. Like you can't imagine that character being played by anybody else, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get that feeling with a lot of what he does.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of his career. I feel that way with Obi-Wan. I love Alec Guinness. I mean,
Right.
no shade or anything there, but the way Ewan McGregor played Obi-Wan, like that was the Obi-Wan I wanted.
And you're like,
Yeah.
you know what? I could see you becoming that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like now, I wouldn't mind if they just remade Episode 4 with him as Obi-Wan. Don't do it, George.
Yeah, don't put
I
that thought
take it all
first.
back. I take it all back.
We're now gonna be like Trent. Just somebody needs to hashtag what he said because now we'll be on all of the fanboy
Yeah.
sites. They'll be watching. They might hate us, but at
They
least
probably already think
numbers.
it's happening.
We
They
should have
probably
put it
already
out on
think it's
April
happening.
1st.
It's not happening.
If you go to fanboy sites, Kathleen Kennedy has been secretly fired, and they're retconning all of the sequels and all this other stuff. That there's zero evidence to
Yeah,
support.
I
any
just
of
can't
it.
I can't go that far into the interwebs.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
the
dark
QAnon
hole.
of the Star Wars universe. That's what that is.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's give this one a grade.
I'll
I
start
started
this
last
time if
time.
you want. I'll
Okay,
start.
go for it.
I'm giving this one an A-. This is a A- for me. I have seen this movie over and over. I will probably, I mean, I know I will watch it again in the future. It's not like an every week kind of movie, but definitely at least once a year. I do feel like it holds up for sure, but I do kind of feel like that this wasn't made right now.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it's Tim Burton's best direction. I think it's probably it's a really great collaborative cast for me, and visually, I just like it just makes me feel everything. Like Jake said, just talking about it, I feel what I feel when I watch the movie, and that doesn't often happen. I think Coda is like that as well. Like we talked about Coda, and when I talk about some of the scenes, when I try to explain to other people why it's such a good movie, I can't get through explaining the scene when the dad is watching her perform. Like
Right.
I start getting just because I know how I feel in that moment makes me like those emotions. And so there aren't very many movies that do that as you just explain them to people. And I think that this one is that for me. So it's an A-.
Awesome.
Nice. I'll go this. I like Burton, but he's not one of my favorite directors, and we've discussed that before. But I do think that this is probably his best work. I like the fact that he's very subdued in this. A lot of the performances are subdued, where it could have been like this wacky, crazy, and it's got this bittersweetness to it, which I love. I related to it, like I said, on a different level than when I first saw this film, because I have changed and grown, and my relationship with my father's changed and grown. I'm going to go with a solid B. This isn't one that I would like need to put on all the time, like Val said, and maybe not even once a year, but it was a nice revisit. And I have a much better feeling towards it and understanding than I did. So thank you for picking this one. This was a good one.
There's no way I can be objective about this one. So I'm just going to tell you that right now. I love this movie so much. If I could give it a grade, what I picture is the scene in A Christmas Story where the teacher starts writing on the board A plus 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 plus. That would be my. I mean, I just love this movie that much. I mean, I feel the same things I feel every time I watch it. I think there are so many depths and layers that it just every time I watch it, I think more deeply on it, and it makes me want to be a better father. It makes me want to be a better son. Makes me want to be a better husband in many ways. Like it just, I don't know. It moves me in ways that a lot of movies can't and don't. And so for me, this is an A plus. I'll say an A because I don't know that we do A pluses, but it's up there for me.
I'm okay
an A
with
plus.
The Story A plus 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 plus.
Yeah,
like all around.
We create our own rules because this is our show.
That's right.
That's right. It is our show.
And I'm going to throw it out there that next week we should talk about A Knight's Tale.
Okay.
Oh man,
I haven't seen.
Oh man,
I would love to talk about that one. That is probably, his name's escaping me now. Not Heath Ledger. He plays Vision in the interview.
Oh, Paul Bettany.
Yeah, Paul Bettany.
This is my favorite Paul Bettany role, and I don't care. See
his butt in this movie. Maybe we should put butts back to back. We
can compare his butt to Danny DeVito's butt and see who's got a better butt.
We'll do a poll.
And then the week after, we could do Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, or really any 1990s Kevin Costner movie, and compare his butt to Paul Bettany's butt.
Costner really liked showing off his butt in the 90s.
Yeah. All right. On that note, thank you so much for watching and listening. We appreciate your support. You can leave us feedback at podcast@moviesthatmakeus.com or on any of our social media sites. We'd love to hear from you. Who had a better butt? Danny DeVito, Paul Bettany? Let us know in the comments. We want to know. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, we won't see you at the movies.
This has been a Stolen Droids Media production.